Hi there, welcome to this episode where we are going to talk about React, what React is, for what you can use it, and what's the difference between technologies like HTML and CSS. So this video is intended for beginners who never touched React and are wondering why everybody's talking about it or why everybody's using it. And later on we will do a quick example where we will basically cover some of the basics and the main idea of React. So I will also post some tutorials later on for React, but we will build some basic block applications, something like that, I guess. But for this video, we are mainly going to talk about the theory and the idea of React. Okay, so on the official site, they say a JavaScript library for building user interfaces, and that's basically all you need to know. React is used to build the front end of a website, of a web application. So as you can see, we have here a nav bar and we can click on the links, and that's to some degree already a user interface, right? We have here buttons and things like that, and we can interact with the application or the website. Okay. So why couldn't we just use HTML and CSS for that? Why do we need React is a question that many people ask. Now, you could, of course, use HTML and CSS to build exactly the same site you're seeing here and use some JavaScript in the background, but this will take a lot of time, and there's one downside to that, and that is that normally you would always load from the server for each file an own HTML file. So I made here this simple illustration, and so for example, this is a website with some blog content and things like that. And imagine if the user would click on one of the blog posts, the server would immediately load a new page that contains the blog post in detail with the title and the content and maybe comments and things like that. Now, if the user would press again back, he would go back to the index site we are seeing right now. And this means that the server has to load each and every content on the site we're seeing, and this takes a lot of traffic, bandwidth, and of course space on the server itself. So for every site we're seeing, we need an own index file, an own HTML file. For example, if you have a checkout cart, you would normally need a new HTML file to render that cart. With React, we have only one index file. That means everything we want to put inside the index file gets rendered and injected by React into that one index file. So for example, if we have a checkout, it gets rendered into the one index file. If we have blog posts, it will be rendered inside the one index file. React basically manages which kind of JavaScript file you want to render and renders it into the HTML file. So we are writing pure JavaScript with React. We are no longer using HTML and CSS. But if we go back to the official documentation here, you see that we still have some kind of div. And down here there's also an example with an h3 tag. So you would probably say, but that looks like HTML. And it is almost like HTML, but it's actually called JSX. So we are using here pure JavaScript, and it uses an engine, it uses a template, so it uses JSX to make it look like we're using HTML, and it has almost the same logic behind it. So if you're familiar with HTML and CSS, you will be totally fine using JSX. There are only just a few differences that I will show later on. Okay, so now React is component based, as you can see here in the description. So that means each container that you're seeing here is an own component in React. So this gives us the ability to render and update each and every single component. So that means, for example, let's say a user wants to change the title of blog post 1 and he clicks on update. This will only update then the post of blog post 1, and it only will update this one container here. The other containers and the other things on the site will be not updated. So we only use bandwidth we only use and send data to this one blog post. Normally, if you are only updating one blog post and click on update in things like Race, the whole site gets updated. Even though we only update one blog post, it loops through everything and there is inside the HTML file. With React, we have control what we want to update, and we can update it and manipulate the state of it. So each component has a state, and I will show you this in just a moment. There is one more thing. So this is the main idea of React, to have to only update and render what you want to render and update. And if you ask why couldn't we do this with HTML and CSS, well, each browser has a render, the so-called DOM, and the DOM is very old and very sluggish. And since a lot of websites are using, all websites are using the DOM, it's not that easy to replace it with a faster system. So that's why React came over. That's why they started to develop React. They said, hey, what if we could manipulate the DOM and render only and update only things we want to update? And so this is the main purpose, the main idea behind React. Okay, so let's start and create our first project here. Now let's open up the terminal. And let's cd to the desktop, and I create just here a folder called React. Now, if you are using npm, I highly recommend you to use create React app. Now, create React app is a boilerplate, and a boilerplate means somebody else already put a full working project for you together, so you simply can start developing your application. Now, you could do this on your own, but if you're a beginner, I highly recommend you to use a boilerplate and play around with React before you start to set up your very own project. Now, because React is only the view in the MVC, you have to do a few things in order to make React work. So React is just a library. It's not a full working framework like Angular, and that's why you need to use a boilerplate. Okay. So if you're using npm, simply type in npm install create React app and then the G tag to make it globally so you can use it everywhere. If you're using Yarn, which I highly recommend, it's much faster and does a lot of things for you automatically. You simply have to type in yarn add and then create React app. Now I don't need to do this. I already have create React installed on my machine. Once you're finished, we'll start to create our project. So let's cd into the Race folder. And to create a new project, you simply have to type in create React app, and let's call it my app. Hit enter. Now this will take a few seconds because all the modules will be installed for you. So I'll pause the video here and start again once it's finished. Alright, so the application is ready to use, so let's cd into that, cd my app, and simply type in yarn start. If you're using npm, you have to type in npm or run start. Okay, so yarn start. And so this will boot up the server and will also open up the project in our browser. So you will see we will have some basic template that comes with create React app. So we have here a nice animated logo, title and a description to get started, edit, source app.js and save to reload. Okay, so let's open up a new tab inside our project folder and let's type in atom. So this will open up Atom right inside my project folder, so this saves a lot of time thing. If you want to do the same, simply go to Atom and click on install shell comments. So this will basically give you the ability to open up Atom right inside your project folder. So as you can see, we have a node modules folder, which doesn't really interest us. We have the public folder and the source folder. So let's open that up. And inside index.js is basically where our only index HTML file is located. Now it is an JavaScript file, as you can see on the JS tag. But down here we are using React DOM. So if you remember, we have talked about the DOM and the browser. So React has a virtual DOM. That's why we can manipulate the state and the component based on the logic we want. So here inside the React DOM, we want to render the app. So let's click on app.js, and you see we have here a class and a component and already a div tag and an h1 tag and a p tag. So this looks really familiar to HTML, right? So let's change the title here. Welcome to my app. Control S, and this will automatically update our file for us. It updated it immediately. Now let's open up here the console, because we will do some kind of things here to show how React works. Okay, so let's delete here the p tag. So let's delete here everything actually. And let's add a div tag. So it's very important, since we are not using HTML but a JSX, we have always to use the div tag. If you put something outside the div tag, you will get an error. So remember that. It looks like HTML, but it's not. So let's create an h1 tag, and let's call this, this is my app. Control S, let's refresh the page, and you see we get that this is my app. Okay, now each component has basically the ability to have an own state, and the state can be updated. So let's just create here a state for our app component. Simply type in state equals, and then whatever you want to put inside the state. It doesn't matter, it can be anything. So let's create a simple string, and let's call it name and leave it empty. Now since we're using JavaScript, we don't need a declaration here. We can simply type a name and then the empty string, and JavaScript knows, hey, we are talking about strings, right? So if we refresh the page, nothing really happened, right? So let's console log this. Now to console log something inside React, you have to do this under the render, because everything that is inside the render will be updated, will be shown to the user or whatever. So let's type in console log and simply state, and you see we get an error here, and that state is not defined, and that's because we always have to use this dot to get the reference to our own state from the own component. So when we update it now, when we are updating it now, you see we have here name and the empty string. So this is working just fine. So we just have created a new state with an empty string of name. Now let's update the state. In React you have things like component Dismount, and what this does is actually it waits for the component to be completely rendered and then does whatever you want. So in this case, we want to update the state. We do this with this.set state and then the name, and let's call this our new state. Let's hit refresh, and you see we get first the empty string and then the new updated string of our new state. So again, React loads the component here and the empty string, and once it's finished, it will fire the component Dismount state. So there are a lot more states. If you're wondering how did I know that there is such a function like a component Dismount, simply go to the documentation, and if we are typing here component Dismount, see we get a reference and an explanation what is going on. And we also have component did mount and component will mount and many more. So you can look it up if you want. Playing around is always the best way actually to learn something. So what if we take this to a next level and update something inside our component so that the user can see the update state? Let's go to the h1 tag, or let's create a new tag. Let's call it P. And let's say this is our state. And then let's open this up and type in this dot state dot name. So when we are refreshing our page, you see that we get now, this is our state and then the name of the state, which is our new state. So we are live injecting, we are manipulating the P tag with our state. So this is exactly what we were talking about with the components that we can update and manipulate. This is basically the idea behind this. So let's add a button. So if we are adding a button here and call this change state, refresh the page, and you see we have now here the button. If we click on the button, nothing happens, right? So let's add an event listener in order to make this button have a function. So on click and then this dot handle change. Now we don't have a function yet that is called handle change, so let's create one. Handle change equals the add the fed arrow function, and then simply make a console log of clicked me. So when we are clicking the change state button, we are calling the handle change, and the handle change will fire a console log of clicked me. So let's test this out. Let's click on change state and you see we get the clicked me message. So this is working. Now let's change the state. Again, to change the state we have to type in this set state. So this set state and then the name, and this is our button state. Here you can see exactly what we were talking about. We have here a new state. If I click change state, you will see that we update only the state here inside the p tag. So everything else wasn't updated. We only update the state here, and that is exactly what React is about. You have, if we refresh the page, we will get the old state again. So in this case, if we click the button again, we will change it. So this is the main idea of React. We have a state, and whatever our state is will be updated when we are clicking the button, and you see that only the state gets updated. Everything else is the same. So we have not reloaded the page or anything, we just changed the state. So again, we are not loading any index file, any HTML file. Everything is inside the one index file, the one HTML file, and whatever we are doing inside this HTML file will be rendered into it. And so this is the way we have access to a component, for example now here our state, and we are able to manipulate the state and update only the state. So we haven't changed the title, we haven't reloaded the page, we simply manipulated, we simply changed the state. Now, of course, we could do this with jQuery as well, but again, jQuery has not the abilities that React has. We can do a lot more things. Now, some of you might say, but I can do this with plain JavaScript and HTML and CSS as well. And that is true, but imagine if you're working on a huge project with a lot of people working on it. If everyone would write their own pure JavaScript, things will get messy. You will have a lot of spaghetti code going on. And that is why it's always a good idea to use frameworks and or libraries like React, force you into certain ways of doing things. And as you can see, our file is pretty much clean. So we just have here a few states, but it looks all in all really clean. Now imagine if we would write down this in pure JavaScript, it would be already a huge file just for simple things like that. So With React, we have a lot of functions to make things much more organized. It looks much more cleaner, and we are doing things in a certain way. So we prevent this, in this case, too much spaghetti code going on when a lot of people working on a project. Okay, so there's actually one more thing I want to show you, and again, this is just the basic idea of React. There's a lot more to be learned. Again, I will do some tutorials. There are also a lot of good tutorials on YouTube itself, so you can look it up if you don't want to wait. But be sure to check out my tutorial that I'm doing, where we will do some basic blog post application with Firebase as our backend or something like that. Okay, so normally in HTML we would write down to add a class equals and then the name of the class, right? But since we're using JSX, we have to type in class name equals and then the title. So again, it's almost the same, like I said, like HTML. There are a few differences, that you have to use the div tag and that you can only add class name instead of class and things like that. So let's go to app.css and let's add title. Let's add a padding at the top of 150 pixels. You see, this works just fine. So again, no huge difference. A lot of people asking how I can learn JSX. You don't. It's actually HTML. You just have to follow a few rules, and that's basically it. Okay, so that would be actually it for this quick introduction into React. I think we covered a few things that are important in order to understand and grasp the core idea of React and what React is all about. I hope you learned what React is now. I hope you understand now why people are using it and what's the reason for it. And again, I will upload some tutorials for React and many other frameworks as well. So if you enjoyed this, if you have any questions, any suggestions, feel free to use the comment section. And if you enjoyed this video, of course, give it a like or subscribe. So far, thanks for watching. I hope you learned a lot, and see you maybe next time. Bye.